Written by the one and only former press secretary for President Trump, Sean Spicer, who's on the line with us right now. Sean, good morning. Thanks for coming on.
Good morning. Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me.
You, listen, how do you handle the bruises, because, I mean, and you're getting it on this book tour. You got people cancel. You had one that canceled in Massachusetts, right?
We did, and it's funny. I mean, I've sold out San Francisco, and yet there's a place in apparently the left went nuts and pushed a place in Massachusetts to cancel, which I think is disappointing because I know that there's a lot of interest in it. We've got 3 additional stops in Rhode Island, so hopefully folks from Massachusetts find some time can drive down. But I just think that's frankly disappointing when that you've got this outrage from the left that doesn't even want to engage and allow people to engage in a discourse. Look, I get it. The world that we live in, people may want to disagree or share their opinion, and that's great. That's the beauty of our country. But the idea that they're trying to force institutions to stamp out this free speech and the expression of ideas is, directly contrary to what the country's all about.
Yeah, there was a time when I thought we learned from those we disagree with. You learn it's insight, right?
I do. I mean, frankly, I do, Bill. I think some of the best and most robust discussions that I have with folks on the left make me a stronger and better conservative because you think about your ideas, you challenge your own thoughts. But I think what we've seen too often in the left now is just shouting down people who they don't agree with. I don't think that's healthy for our culture and our society.
Yeah, I totally agree. So let's just dig right into the book. This is basically you start out with the end and talk about where you're going, what you're trying to accomplish with the book.
Well, I think there's 2 big things. One is I think because of the historic nature of both the campaign, the transition, and the White House, I wanted to make sure that I documented some of those really behind-the-scene moments that people might not have had an opportunity to know about, and also because of the fast nature pace that all of it happened in.
Yeah.
That there are a lot of stories and behind-the-scenes moments that I think will be forgotten or never told if I didn't write them down because I was uniquely situated that I was there for all of that. Secondly, I just think that there's a lot of questions that were came about me personally, where it was like, what were you thinking in that moment? How did you get there? What was your motivation for whatever, this particular event? And I wanted to document it in my own words so that I didn't have people speculating based on a bunch of anonymous reporting about what I felt and why I did what I did.
Yeah, I remember the I call it the scolding in that first briefing. Is there any part of that you regret? This distrust with the media today. It almost seems like it's an us versus them. Do you regret any of that?
In the book, I walked through it all, and I said, if I could have a do-over on that day, Bill, I'd take it right now. But on a variety of fronts, the tone and the tenor, and I look back and I go, I could have been a much better person and a much better professional that day. I do that, I try to do that most days too, which is, what did you learn today? How can you grow as a person? And that's one of those days where I think the die was cast for so much of what I would do going forward, and it's unfortunate. And on a variety of fronts, I wish I could do it over.
Did you, by the way, I just bought the book. Bought it like 15 minutes ago. It was an hour ago. My iBooks account had to, I don't know what was going on. My wife bought too many books or something. I don't know. But I own the book. So I don't know. Some of the answers I don't know. So I've not read it completely yet. So were there times, because the president, at least the reporting was, that the president's unhappy. He didn't think Sean Spicer was strong enough today. Did he coach you, and was there any truth to that?
Well, number one, of course. I would go and talk to him about what we wanted to say. And I learned over time that he was very particular with what he wanted said and how he wanted said.
Yeah.
He would go back and he'd say, and think about it for a second. I know a lot of people find this so, interesting, but the fact is that if you're going to speak about what somebody thinks and believes and feels, it's a good job to really know what they think and feel and believe. And the president was very particular about how he wanted certain actions described. I understand that completely. I don't think it's that crazy. but he understands the amount of attention and intensity that was facing him and this administration, and wanted to make sure that when an action or a feeling or a belief was described, it was done so in the most accurate terms of what he believed or felt.
Yeah. And I know in the book and in the interviews that I've seen, you're very specific on saying it wasn't your job to change what the president said. It was your job to communicate to the public what the president said, what his feelings were.
Correct. And I stand by that.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't think it's a job of a spokesperson. I mean, to go in and say, well, here's what I think he should say. I mean, he's the president of the United States.
Yeah.
He was elected by the American people to lead our nation. And my job is, when asked about his particular view or feeling or belief on a situation, is to communicate it as close to exactly how he would answer the question himself.
Yeah. Is there any point where you look? I mean, are you a junkie, a political junkie? Do you watch?
Oh God! I mean, I've spent a career doing this.
Yeah.
6 years at the RNC and years of being on Capitol Hill and campaign.
So are there times?
And frankly, that was sort of personally my big fun part of the job, that I get to geek out politically with a bunch of folks in the book, is walking through and explaining, for I think really the first time, what was going on during the campaign in terms of what the data was showing, and why we made some of the decisions that we did.
Yeah.
That to me is one of my favorite parts of the book.
Well, and by the way, we must credit you with launching the new daily television program, which is the White House press briefing. Because listen, there were briefings every day, but they were never broadcast live until you guys. So, my question would be: do you ever look at Sarah Huckabee Sanders and say, "Oh, I so feel for you"?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Because I know what it's like, and there's not a ton of people that have been there. And part of the book is to give people who wonder what that's like, not just the routine and the logistics of it, but also the emotional toll that the job takes and the intensity that weighs on you and your family. I mean, there's one section in the book where I talk about, I get a call from my wife, and someone has taken the liberty of putting our house up for sale. You can't sit there and complain about it. No one cares. It's not your job. But it's interesting. There's a human side to this, to the job, that it's interesting to be able to share with people.
Yeah. We're talking to Sean Spicer, former press secretary for President Trump. The book is called The Briefing. Andrew with a question.
So it seems like basically when you talk about, having to talk exactly as if the president would say it, do you think he'd prefer to just not have a press secretary and just do the daily press briefings himself?
I think he understands the need.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's busy, but it just seems like...
I'd like to go back to when you were with the RNC and we're leading up, and there is no nominee. The president, Donald Trump, the candidate's doing really well, but there were another, 15, 16 candidates out there. You were not, I don't believe, you were in with Trump until after the nomination. You can correct me with that. But I'd like to know, what were people inside the RNC thinking, like, oh, my God, this guy is, I can't believe it, but I think he's going to be the nominee? What went on then?
Well, look, I think one of the things that for people who aren't involved in party politics need to understand is that, and I've been there 6 years through the Romney campaign and a variety of gubernatorial and Senate, congressional races, is that your job is to truly be that neutral arbiter. And so you lose, you don't, it's almost like being the commissioner of a league, where your goal is to provide a fair playing ground for everyone to compete on and not root for any particular team. So our goal is to constantly evaluate, are we going to end up with a nominee at whatever office we're talking about that can win? That's your goal, is to win elective offices and to reelect people and to grow as a party. That's literally how you see your job. And that's what our goal was, is to make sure that we had the resources to whomever, to buttress whoever was going to be that nominee.
Yeah. So there was no, are you saying that there was no, I cannot believe that Donald Trump is going to win this?
Oh, sure. Look, I can't, there's not a ton of people. When you look at historically what campaigns look like structure-wise in the background that most candidates had, he clearly did not fit the mold. There's no question.
Yeah.
He's a historic candidate and ran a historic campaign, structurally and in every other way.
It is interesting. You had two parties basically that that had a candidate that they didn't choose. The Republicans in Trump, the Democrats in Bernie Sanders. The Democrats overpowered. They just plowed it through. We're picking our candidate no matter what the voters say, and because they had to win, and ultimately look at the outcome. Pretty funny, ironic, don't you think?
Well, yes, but I mean, remember, this is like, it's not like this isn't the 1960s or where party bosses are making these decisions. I mean, our nominee was decided by more votes than ever before. We had more states and more voters participate in the primary process. And so it was the voters, the grassroots voters of the Republican Party and the conservative movement who chose our nominee.
Are you bothered that some reporters, I saw one of the BBC interview, saying that you are responsible. You were basically allowing the president to lie, and you were going out and reinforcing those lies. Are you offended by that?
I think that when people wonder why the media's approval rating is what it is, in terms of the elite media, I think that just shows it. I mean, the idea that kind of accusation would be thrown out and taken seriously, and I stopped her in the middle of the interview and said, with all due respect, you honestly are trying to say that everything bad in the world started with the election of Donald Trump. Just shows how out of touch a lot of these folks are. Not all of them, but I think for a lot of and that's the thing. I don't paint everybody with a broad brush, but it's amazing to me after how wrong so many in the media got the election, and lack a connection to working men and women across this country, that they continue to exacerbate that disconnect.
Well, last thing, your favorite takeaway from your book that you want people to really understand.
Oh, wow. That's like asking you to choose who your favorite kid is. I mean, I hope you read. I'd love you to read it and tell me what you think. I think there's some personal stories in there, and then there's some political and behind the scenes things that I really love. But there's some personal moments in there that I might really like, that might not resonate as much as someone else because they're personal. So I would be interested in your take after you read the book.
Well, let's discuss that when you come in studio, when you take your book tour upstate here. So
that's the deal.
Love to do it. Sean Spicer, thanks so much. Good luck out there, and I'm going to be reading the book starting today. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Andrew. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I would say that was pretty darn cool. Sean Spicer, Senator Griffo, not bad.
That was a great interview, an interesting guy, and you should have talked about whether or not he would actually make an appearance on SNL now himself.
You might see that coming up.